I am.
Hi.
And hello.
Hello, everybody.
Oh boy, not the intro I really wanted, but hey, whatever works for all
But
of
the
us.
intro we needed. So,
Yeah,
keeping
probably
us keeping
For
us
what it's
all
worth.
on our toes.
you know, sometimes you gotta.
This is Captain Ron, the co-founder of Great Pods, the Rotten Tomatoes for podcasts, where we collect professional podcast reviews from all over the web to one site to help you discover and decide your next podcast. So on our first audio long-form podcast interview, we're joined by Em, seen here, and Christine from the popular And That's Why We Drink podcast. We're also joined by Keelin from Mentally a Magpie blog. Keelin also has a lot of podcast reviews on her blog, so definitely check them out. Now, before we start, just to let you know, we did this on Zoom and I was still learning how to edit it together. We had a bunch of little small Zoom boxes, so bear with me on this first timer. Shout out to Metro Public Relations for setting this interview up, and go get the book, Haunted Road Atlas. Listen to the podcast, And That's Why We Drink, and check out Em and Christine on tour. Here we go.
I am all about time efficiency over here. So,
Hey, I appreciate that.
so we know that you guys started as kind of like, you're the one person in this city that I know and don't hate. Let's be
about it.
friends. What was your moment where it was like, we could start a podcast? What was that thing of like, oh, we can totally do this?
I think I was the one who had the idea, but Christine was 100% the one with the action. Because I, when we first met, Christine was the one who introduced me what podcasts even are and suggested a few to me that were true crime, paranormal, just because those seem to be the two places we intersected the most in conversation. And she was like, oh, these are really fun. You should listen to these. And I just started listening while I was at work. And I had a kind of a job where I worked with my hands where it was kind of a mindless job. I was just kind of moving. So I was able to listen to my podcast that Christina recommended. And I must have been listening to an episode where someone was saying, oh, we had to quit our jobs because of the show or because the show is going so well. And I was like, they're able to make it. Like, what if we were to test this out as just a fun hobby to do with each other, but two, as a kind of an archive or documenting our friendship as it's growing, because we were brand new to even being friends with each other.
Yeah, it was very intimidating because Em reached out and was like, I'm very like commitment phobic, and Em reached out and was like, hey, I know we're new pals. Why don't we start this like massive media project together? And I was like, and
I think one of the things that had me so willing to say that, because I'm also a big commitment phobe, was I was very unaware of how much work a podcast was. So
that's true.
I think I was very much like, let's just buy some microphones and press record. And I was thinking like a camera at a sleepover where you press on, then you press off.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I mean, you're not wrong in some ways, but yeah, no. So Em was like, oh, well, like all these other podcasters do it. Why can't we? And I couldn't come up with a good enough response. And my husband at the time was like, you need a hobby. Like you need to get out of bed and get a hobby, please. Like you're just depressed in LA. Please do something. So I was like, fine, I'll try it. And lo and behold, it actually, kind of worked. And we spent our last savings on the audio equipment. And thank God it worked because we were broke.
I listened to that first episode. I went back. What I like to do when there's a long running podcast and I haven't listened in a while or whatever, I like to go to the very front and see that progression.
Yeah.
If you guys remember, how did you guys feel after finishing it? And what about your grandparents? about the whole cursing situation?
Yes.
The immediate response.
You know what? That's a great question that I don't think we've ever been asked to like think back that far. And I love to, we're very nostalgic people. I feel like this is a fun question for us.
Really hitting us around the heartstrings.
Em, how do you remember feeling a certain way?
I don't know. I feel like I always I never really, the only aha moment I had was when we came up with the name. That was when something happened in the world where I was like, oh, this feels really special.
We'll get it right. You had, I mean, I remember it very vividly, like, we'll get it right. And this is, and wait, 1, 2, 3.
And then we messed up the title. The first line of our entire show is us forgetting our own title.
And that's why we drink. We'll get it right.
This is why we drink. But I think when we actually recorded it, I'd already had the aha moment with the title that I was already coasting and this is going to be a good show. And I was having fun. I think that was the reason why we took off so quickly is we were just having fun.
Yeah. I was a mess when we started. I was so nervous. I don't know why. Like I was just desperately nervous. And then when we finished it, I was terrified to go back and listen and hear, oh my God, it was terrible. We're not funny. I don't know. I was very nervous. But I had to edit it, so I had to listen to it. But the audio got screwed up and I was like, this is not a good start. Like the audio is all wonky, but we're going to release it anyway. And we just kind of winged it and released it.
As for our grandparents, I think my mom for like a good year did think it was a radio show, like what were they calling it originally?
They're calling it a lot of things, a blog, a YouTube. Some people said like what AM station is it on?
I think both of our moms at different times didn't understand. I think they thought it was just the audio part of a YouTube show and they were confused why they couldn't see it.
Couldn't find our faces. It's a lot of chaos.
My mom still doesn't understand what I do. So
I think that's
what's a podcast
millennial like statement. Our parents don't get it.
Yeah.
What were the skills that you're like, okay, I can take it from this and put it straight into podcasting? What was like the 1 or 2 things that you're like, okay, I know how I can do this?
Okay, I love this question.
It's 100% a Christine answer.
I just love this question because I feel very vindicated on behalf of my 90-year-old college professor, Dr. Doolittle, who taught me radio 101. And I remember thinking, oh dear, this poor man, he's trying to teach me radio. I'm in broadcast journalism. Radio is dead. What are we doing? Learning Audacity. And he's like, oh no, podcasts are the new radio. And I was like, oh gosh, this guy. But I listened to him. I learned Audacity. I learned how to publish a podcast. It's still out there somewhere from my college years. Somewhere in the, I don't know, World Wide Web. Don't go looking for it. It's probably really embarrassing. I'm
sorry. You just said World Wide Web. So just
I'm
want to point
you
that out.
sound like 90-year-old Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, I'm channeling Dr. Doolittle. You got in my head. I'm sorry. But yeah, so when we started editing, I was like, oh my God, I actually know how to edit audio like pretty well. I did this for years in college. And I studied video editing too. So that kind of helped a little bit. And so anytime we were doing like bonus content or YouTube stuff for Patreon, all of that just was already stuff I had done for years in college in what I felt was a wasted degree, but I guess not really. So that was nice.
Yeah, just like, I mean, that's where I say that I was the person who came up with the idea. But once Christine committed to it, I'd like to use this every opportunity I can to always publicly announce that Christine is the reason our podcast took off, because I didn't know any of this. I didn't even try any of this. I was
you were busy. I was at my temp job, like pretending to work. So
I was the jerk who was like, here's an idea, aka here's an assignment for you because I don't know what I'm doing and you handle it. And
I was unhinged. I just went like 110%. I went on like all the true crime podcast, like forums, and was trying to like figure out the right way to like promote the show with the right verbiage. Like I was all over the place, but
so smart. Yeah. I would have never been able to do that. And also Christine was like, oh, I know Audacity, I'll handle it. And I was like, fine. Like, this is a real nice job for me.
That's a really good relationship to have. Like, you know, each other's skills like who's really good at something and the other person. And it's just like great synergy to have in
Yeah.
general. I
And
mean,
I
you
think that-
figured out how to.
Yeah,
and I
it
think
just
that's
all
why
fell
we're
into place so well.
lucky. Yeah, because I remember thinking like, what are we getting ourselves into? But then Em was like, hey, I got the promotional stuff. Like I was in a fraternity and I can sign 450 people up to listen to the episode right now. And I was like, I have 6 friends, so I
did have the social skills. I have the social backing.
Right. And I'm like, I'll just figure out the coding of the okay. And so you were able to do a big chunk of it, and I was able to do the other chunk. And I feel like somehow synergy, like you said.
Did you have anything that you were like, oh, I totally can do this? And then you walked up to be like, yes, I can sit down. I can use Audacity. I can, hook up microphones, whatever. And then it fell apart and you're like, well, I have to learn this now.
All Christine, you take it away, girl.
Well, yes. It was more in the sense of when things got bigger. I feel like I could definitely handle a project in the scope of it being a school size project. Like, an audio thing I can edit and then upload. Fine, easy peasy. When it came to more, things like this is a real business now, and you actually have to know how to run a business and do taxes. And I'm like, I know how to do TurboTax. Oh my God, what a mess. Because that year we had gone to, I think, 6 different states or something. It was something ridiculous where we had
a practice tour. So we had been, someone had reached out offering to be our tour or our booking agent. And they said, well, let's put you on a practice tour and go to certain markets and see if a tour would sell. Yeah. And so we had gone to 6 practice cities.
Exactly. And we came home with this paperwork and I never thought about, you have to pay taxes on that in different states. And all of a sudden it just hit me like, I'm way out of my depth here. And Em was like, oh, Christine, how does this work? And I was like, oh shit. Like I really talked big game about being able to do, the business side. I set up like our LLC. I had everything kind of the basics.
I really felt so safe in Christine's arms. And then I just came into play.
Yes.
At one point, Christine texted me now we have a business manager who handles all that. Thank God. But before that, Christine texted me, was like, I don't want to scare you, but I think we're going to jail. Like, it's just like,
I literally was like talking to like 3 different people, including my parents. And they all were like, yeah, that's a federal crime. And you're probably going to jail. It's like, so how do I tell this to Em on our lunch break?
How do I start this text message that we're about to be prisoners? Yeah. So I also
had
100 shirts and
had to make the merch at work and then try to.
That was where my skills came in because I was a screen printer, and so I was like, I'll make our shirts every night I would go to Walmart and I would buy out all of their t-shirts. All of them, every blank t-shirt that they had. And I would just, on my lunch break, just screen print every single one of them and then give them to Christine and be like, have fun on your lunch break while you mail these.
It quickly got out of hand because all of a sudden we were like, oh, we have 600 orders to send. That's too much for my 30-minute lunch break at Nickelodeon. And they're not thrilled that I keep coming back late. So
that's an I Love Lucy episode right there.
It really is.
You bought all these jars, you're buying all these clothes, you have them stacked up. How do we get
Well, I also think it's a really good, it kind of is a window into how we saw the show from the beginning, where I think we never had any intentions of it blowing up and getting really big. I think we were just having fun and we thought truly maybe our moms will listen. And I honestly didn't think we'd make it past 10 episodes. I thought it'd be a fun hobby and then it would kind of wear off. And then I'd be like, well,
yeah, we're two Geminis and we're kind of like flighty. And I feel like we were going to be like, are you as well? I saw but yeah, see, you get it. And so we were like, oh, we'll just try, get to know each other, then find a new fun thing to do. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is a real job and something we really care about and have to do. So that's definitely one thing I try to tell people is like, don't over commit to too much. Don't put too much on your own plate. Cause we were like, we'll sell merch. We'll start a Patreon. We'll do all of this at once while we have full-time jobs without really planning ahead. So that's definitely something I recommend.
Yeah.
So then in these years, what's been the hardest part of maintaining what you have, especially considering that Christine has now moved 3/4 of the way across the country?
And as a baby.
Don't
and has
remind
a
me.
baby. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Baby is
Thank you.
adorable.
Thank you. She's downstairs, hopefully being quiet. So
She's weirdly cute. It's unsettling. I think Christine made a deal with someone down there, I think.
the weirdest thing is people always comment, "Oh my gosh, she looks just like M," and I'm like,
What?
"Why do people have this strange?" I don't even want to know. I don't ask. I'm like, okay.
I'm into it. Whatever. Okay. Hey.
Yeah, no, we have a lovely producer named Eva who started off as just an assistant doing just like admin, because that's when we got overwhelmed at the beginning with shipping stuff, and we were like, we need someone to at least read the emails, and now she's like our full-fledged like tour manager and like emotional support animal, and basically any type of assistance we need, she kind of fills that role. So that's been majorly helpful. But yeah, things tend to get overwhelming. We're still not great at scheduling it ahead, so maybe someday we'll learn.
I feel like after we've been doing this for 5 years now, and some things you think, oh, within a few months, like you figure out that that's a constant thing you have to always be on top of. And then there's still things that like we should have figured out 5 years ago. And we're like, oh yeah, we should probably get on that. So one of the best things that I mean, we have said before, I don't know if we've said it publicly, but certainly behind closed doors, that like, if all of our luck could have been piled into one event with the podcast, we are so lucky that we found Eva. I mean, she's just handled everything, and she's been around for so long now that it doesn't feel like our assistant or our producer. She feels like just a third part of the podcast. Yeah. So anytime she's been able to say like, hey, I think I need some help, we're like, hey, we're going to trust you on that. Like, if you think you need help, you are running the whole thing. We're like,
take a vacation. So we'll figure this out. We can't lose you.
Tell us, we'll hand it to you, whatever you need.
Oh boy, poor Eva.
A book is kind of like that really big thing that so many people kind of dream about, but then realize, oh, wow, a book.
That's what we thought too. Oh, wow.
Right. If anything that we've told you so far about how we didn't expect things to be as hard as they were, it translated back to books too.
So how did the idea come about? Were you guys just sitting there going back and forth? Did someone approach you? Where did the Haunted Road Atlas kind of come from?
We had a book idea since 2018, because that was when we were at the Webbies. I remember talking about it with you. So
we had kind of like a little goals. We were like, what are our like dreams? And one of them was write a book, and it seemed laughable at the time.
Yeah. And I think I always had the idea. I feel like anytime we talked about the book, I kind of forced the idea on you that it would be, with different locations throughout the country that were haunted or had.
And it made so much sense just because like, the Atlas Obscura type book, that's the kind of thing that we've always been drawn to and that we use a lot as like a resource, and the kind of thing is a really big fan of. And like since I was 2, have wanted to write a book, and was like, that wasn't necessarily on my life goal list, Christine. But so when it was more of like a cool interactive guide, and was like, yeah, that I can get on board with, and that I will write. So we kind of, came up with that and brainstormed it out and wrote a little treatment and pitched it around, and somebody was like, sure, okay, you can do it.
How does you, having written over 200 episodes of your podcast, as much as it is your natural banter, I know that you have to have at least bullet points in front of you.
We do have bullet points. Yes.
How did that translate to writing for the book when it comes to writing for something you're speaking versus something you're only writing, or unless you're doing the audiobook too?
That's interesting.
I think we were really lucky that the publisher we started working with, I think she was actually a fan of the show to begin with. And so her suggestion from the beginning was, everyone loves your voice on the podcast, so your voice should be what carries through the book. So I think I never really thought about it structurally as 2 different writing forms. I was just kind of free thought writing, because that I kind of got permission to do that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to write this instead of bantering. But when it came to our actual notes, I don't think there was a a difference or a similarity in format. When I think of the notes and I think of the book, I think, thank God I kept all of my notes, because that was really helpful in writing the book, because I'd already done the research.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I feel like I was able to look at the bullets of the story. They're not all stories we've already covered, so some of them were new research, but for the ones I did cover on the podcast and then write into a chapter, it was sort of like looking at the bullet and thinking, how would I have said this on the show to tell M, and I would just write it that way. So it was, like Em said, it was kind of a lucky setup where we just got to kind of type the way that we would have told the story to each other. So we had done it so many times that even the new research was like, oh, I insert a probably unfunny joke here, and write it structurally in the way that I would have told M on the show. So it kind of was, once he got going, don't get me wrong, it took a long time. It was a lot of work.
A long time.
It was fun. It was kind of cool.
When you're talking about the team for your book versus your podcast, how has that looked? Similar, different? Are you overlapping with your same team, or has it kind of become, this is book world, this is podcast world?
Ooh.
Damn, your questions are...
These are the funnest questions we've ever gotten. Wow. I was like, really...
Full disclosure, I do research to make sure my questions don't get too repetitive, because I know everyone wants to hear the same things. I'm like, I don't.
I love that, because as much as like we have the same rote answers that we've said a million times, which makes it, I guess, easy, but like it is fun to just kind of really think about our answers.
You're making us think is the problem. So.
Yeah. Ow. No, it's good. It's good.
I think the only overlap was our manager being in on a lot of the meetings with the book team. So
she did, like you said, listen to the podcast before. So she kind of got the vibe we were looking for, the illustration style we were hoping for.
Yeah, I think she was able to answer questions. If there's ever it was our first book, we don't know, but if there's usually more back and forth with clarifying emails, I think she was probably able to handle them for us, because she knew what we're about.
Awesome. So now the fun question about the book is that, what are your top locations from your Atlas road trip?
That's a great question. I mean,
I have one.
Oh, what's yours?
I had the most fun writing the Cecil Hotel chapter, the Los Angeles city, just because that one has always been chock full of ghosts, and it's pretty notoriously haunted, at least in LA. Everyone knows about it. And so that was fun to write about, because I knew I'd have a lot of material. My big fear with each of the stories that we wrote on was that I wasn't going to have enough information, or it would be too vague. Or
I think my favorite was New Orleans, and that was actually the chapter we submitted as a sample chapter, because we felt like most, I don't know, excited about that chapter, most comfortable with it. Just because we had gone there on tour and had our own paranormal experiences. One of my favorite cities in the world. And so writing everything, there's a section on like what we did on tour. And even that section, like M went on an alligator swamp tour. Eva and I went and got tattoos on a whim. Like there's just so much that happened that it was like such a fun chapter to write. And I do want to go back and like relive the glory days of that one, and actually go to some of the haunted places we've listed. So I would say New Orleans is always my go-to.
And then was there somewhere that surprised you that you didn't think would be as interesting, or kind of had an extra twist that you were like, I did not expect this?
Oh, off the top of my head, it was a little fun to do my own hometown and kind of learn things like that I had no idea were haunted. In my, like, M wrote some things out, and I read M's part of the chapter and was like, that's right by my house. So that was kind of a fun little surprise for me. But
I was actually going to say my favorite, I didn't know that story, was the one about Christine's hometown, where it was called the Sedansville.
Yes, Satamsville, I think.
Is that how you say it?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, well, we already recorded the audiobook and I said Sedansville, but
you said Sedamsville?
I think so. Whoops.
Oh, the people of Sedan,
they're going to be pissed.
They're
and I'm going to join them in my with my pitchfork.
To be fair, I Googled a news report and they kept saying Sedamsville. So I was like, all right, here we go.
Did?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that story continues to shock me, apparently, with even its pronunciation.
Maybe I'm wrong. If it was in a news thing, I trust them more than myself. So,
well, you're gonna have 680 people after you.
I was gonna say, like, you let us know how the critics handle how I said Sedam.
Yeah, the critics will have something to say. I'm not gonna read those 1-star reviews.
But that location was definitely the spookiest story I covered, I think, in the whole book. I was shocked because I never heard of it before. And then all this research I was doing on it, I was like, how have I, this is like, should be in listicles everywhere as like one of the most haunted places. So anyway.
You got to come visit again.
Like, when did you have that hit? Like, oh, we got something here.
Yeah.
Just that moment.
I remember very, very vividly. I was at work doing my usual not working. And I was on Twitter trying to promote the podcast. And I realized we got a DM from somebody who said, oh, I'm loving the show. It's so good. And then signed it Miranda or something. And I was like, great. So glad you're loving the show. And I sent it to Em and I said, is this like a friend of yours? One of your 450 friends or something? And Em was like, no, I don't know that person. Do you? And I was like, no. And that was when we realized, like, oh, people who aren't affiliated with us in any way are finding out about the podcast organically and are engaging and reaching out and following us. And that was kind of a moment of like, oh shit, like this isn't just people we know listening. This was only a few weeks in, I would say, or like a month or two in. And I was like, oh boy. And from there, it just kind of kept happening where like more and more people were kind of finding us and finding each other and making like a little Facebook group. And I think that's when I realized, like, oh, this is a bigger thing than we anticipated. And we've got a lot of responsibility now to keep this going.
Have you kept in touch with Miranda at all?
Miranda, I'm like, I even made up her name. I don't even
I was like,
realized we could look at a map of where people were listening, and we saw we had someone listening in like
Norway. Remember
Sri
Lisa?
Lanka,
We know
Norway.
Lisa.
Norway, we still keep in touch with, our first Norwegian listener.
We were like, oh, intercontinental, crazy.
Ooh la la. Yeah. So we were very excited about that. So it was those little things at the beginning that were like big moments, because it sort of felt like, oh, we're doing something right. And if we keep doing it, you know, maybe this will just climb and climb. And I think the first time, at least monetarily speaking, that I felt like we had something that could be financially successful was, this is so stupid. We were mailed boxes of tampons, and it was part of like a sponsorship. And I was like, I just got free tampons because I host a podcast. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm doing it.
How did they get your address? First of all.
Oh no, they were an official sponsor.
Okay.
They didn't just casually mail them out of nowhere. It was like an official sponsor we had signed on with, and they were like, "Oh, here, we'll send product." And I was like, "Product?" And all of a sudden,
what does that mean?
I know, what does that mean? Free product? And so I was getting tampons and like talking about tampons, and they paid us like, I don't know, probably like $100 or $50.
Not even. Our first sponsor was $40.
Okay, $40. Yep.
And I remember thinking, we can both get dinner tonight.
Like we have money to order out. Yeah.
I think it had to have been around the 60s mark, because that was when we got Eva. We got Eva, like she's a puppy dog. But
we adopted her.
We do celebrate Gotcha Day with her, by the way. So technically, I would say around the 60s, because I remember being rather confident by the time.
I think that's what it was, is we've had somebody to help with all the little admin stuff. We could focus on actually doing the podcast. We hadn't gotten totally I don't want to say overworked, but we hadn't gotten totally overwhelmed with touring and working full time. And like, we were kind of in that sweet spot where Eva was there to help us with all the admin stuff we didn't have time to do. And yeah, it was probably in like the 60s. And that's kind of when there were people joining every day, like joining the, Facebook group. And we were really engaged with that. It ended up becoming too unwieldy. We had like 27,000 people in it, and it imploded.
Just like one thing that stood out in both of your minds, that you tried it, you failed it, and you overcame it.
I think
what was the solution?
I think we first failed at the first attempt at Patreon where we were trying to ship things to like 6,000 people. That was a big failure. And we were like, okay, let's regroup and redo this. I think we failed at, not failed, but I think we found a much better solution from our first tour to our second tour. I think our first tour comparatively feels like a failure because of how easy the second one has been made, because we put so much effort into making sure that we weren't as stressed.
The first tour we did, just for clarification, was like almost 50 cities in like a 3.5 month span. And we didn't realize this probably answers a lot of questions. But we didn't really realize we could say no. So
we're just so grateful that people wanted to even see us, that we were afraid to say no and not
our
get invited back.
Booking agent was like, hey, how about one of these? How about 2 shows a night in Houston? How about 2 shows a night in Chicago? And we just kept being like, okay.
And we were saying yes to places that weren't even
moly.
They weren't even well organized geographically. So we would be going here, then all the way to here, and then across the country, and then down here. And then we would go back to the same city we were just at 3 days ago, because now that had an opening. So it wasn't even
let's just say boundaries weren't our strong suit. And I'm still working on that. And I think that wraps up into every other aspect that's been a failure or a struggle, is like, I'm not great at boundaries. We struggled to say no. Now we set out very clear ground rules for our second tour beforehand, so that like our tour manager is like, okay, I know what to do, what not to do, and to limit the amount of travel and all that. And
also the whole format of the show changed to where it's a lot less stressful, because we were also putting out basically an original show per city.
Even when there were 2 in one night, we were doing a different show for every show.
Wow.
and releasing weekly episodes. And honestly, we realized pretty quickly, not only was that terrible for us, but it was not good for the podcast, because people were saying like they're phoning it in, like they don't want to be here, and like
it sounded like we were exhausted with each other, because we were all over the place and jet lagged and tired, and we were seeing each other all the time, so there was nothing to catch up on, so the banter wasn't there. I mean, it was a mess. So the second tour is a lot better now. So if you recall, I'm a butterfly, so the meet and greets were fine for me.
And was like, these are all my 450,000 friends I met across the way.
Like, let's hug it out, let's take pictures. And Christine was like, please let me go to sleep.
I was like, why are you handing me human teeth, ma'am?
Yeah, that was weird. We had some.
But I'm gonna pretend like but I love it. I love it. I'm gonna cry in my hotel room later. But thank you for all the human teeth. I love it.
Oh no! Wait, what?
Yes.
Is that really one of the weirdest gifts you gotten?
Yes.
We've gotten a lot of teeth. It was
a lot of teeth, haunted dolls that like set people's houses on fire, hair, candles said someone stole from a vigil, from a funeral. I was like, what are you doing? I don't want this. Anyway, I'm getting worked up. Does this answer your question? Probably not.
I think that's cool. You know what?
We can end on teeth. Okay.
Yeah, the teeth and the creepy dolls.
You know, it's so weird, Em. Every time we bring up teeth, people are like,
I'd just run away.
Was it their teeth or was it somebody else's teeth?
There was one person who gave us a set of like 200 separate teeth.
Many different teeth. And we never learned where they procured such teeth. They just showed up.
He was like, oh, I forgot your gift in my car. And he brought us like a literal collection of multiple people's teeth. And he was like, I can't believe I almost forgot to give this to you. And I'm like, I can't believe you remembered. I wish you forgot.
He's like, can you wait here? I have to go get your present. We're like, sure. We waited like 15 minutes. I'm like, we waited 15 minutes for a box of teeth. Oh my God. Cursed.
Anyway. Where did you get them? And why was 200 so easy for you to let go? Do you have thousands?
And why us? Why? What about me? You know, what about me says I need 200 teeth?
Fantastic. Wow. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun for us. We never get such fun questions. I'm not kidding. This was
Thank you for original questions. I appreciate it.
What a blast.
Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
All of you. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Em. Thanks, Keelin. And thanks, Nikki, for being on the call as well. Hopefully you can tell everybody at work that it was great.
I'm Em Schultz.
And I'm Christine Schieffer, and we are the hosts of the Paranormal True Crime podcast, and That's Why We Drink.
And you're listening to Great Pods Podcast.
To the Great Pods Podcast.
Damn.
And the Great Podcast.
That's what I was saying is the.
I'm just going to leave all that in there.
I'm going to say it again, though. You're listening to The Great. Okay, here. I'm M. Schultz.
Sorry, I didn't know we were starting the whole thing.
Here we are. I'm M. Schultz.
And I'm Christine Schieffer, and we are the hosts of the Paranormal True Crime Podcast, and that's why we drink.
And you're listening to the Great Pods Podcast.
Yeah.